The Louisville Cardinals must land more elite talent in the 2026 class.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Happy Friday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com. for 50% off of your first year. Pat Kelsey and the Louisville Cardinals must land more elite level talent in the 2026 recruiting cycle. I'm going to explain why on the show today. We'll discuss the Tyran Stokes sweepstakes, adding elite level guards. Who would the options be in the front court that the Cardinals could pursue, and much more. Pretty complex discussion that we're going to have today. And the most recent episode was about delivering a recruiting update where Louisville is sitting in a good spot with multiple top guard options, even some wing options. But the bottom line is that the Cardinals must land more elite level talent in this class. They have to continue the momentum in recruiting. Pat Kelsey gets another year to build relationships. It's hard to really decide how good of a recruiter a coach is without getting him or giving him a couple of cycles to recruit. 2025, he lands Michael Brown Jr. and Sinan Defru and Muhammad Kamara. 2026, he has been recruiting his head off. I mean, multiple top players that the Louisville Cardinals are linked to and much more. But again, it comes back to the point that the Cardinals must close on these recruitments and bring in those top level players. Now, when you talk about elite, I don't want to get too deep into the conversation here. I'm basically referring to 5-star level talent, top 25 players. Now, rankings can be narrative based at times, depending on where a guy commits to, can, raise his ranking for no reason. And that's pretty much been proven. So you can't hang on to rankings too much, but for the most part in basketball, the top prospects landing in the top 25. I'm going to go out and say that, in my opinion, and this is something I'm going to explain all episode long, 2 elite prospects. That is my goal for this recruiting cycle for the Cardinals. Land 2. You don't have to bring in a class of 5-star players. I don't think that that's really going to be possible with today's NIL. But 2 elite prospects, you got 1 last cycle. I think you can land 2 this cycle. Now, there's the whole argument about the transfer portal and how the final 4 teams this year were mainly made up of veteran transfers, not many difference-making freshmen. I understand that. I also don't think that that is going to be the case every single season. And I'm not suggesting that Louisville shouldn't bring in elite level transfers, but with more donors getting back on board, with the Cardinals being better, with revenue sharing now in place, with Louisville spending more on basketball with revenue sharing than a lot of other teams out there, I just don't think that there's a huge reason as to why Louisville can't get 2 elite players and also fill out the roster with pretty solid talent via the transfer portal and guys coming back. So as it relates to 2 elite players, I don't really have a priority list outside of the very top, and my priority list at number 1 is probably that of other fans' priority lists and probably the coaching staff as well. It all starts with the number 1 prospect in the class, Louisville native Tyran Stokes. Stokes has been, a blue chip recruit for the past couple of seasons. Even when he was a freshman, Louisville fans sort of identified him as the guy that you sit there and say, oh, yeah, when he gets a little bit older, junior, senior year, the Cardinals need to land his commitment. He's that good of a player, and he's been number one in his class or number two in his class for multiple seasons. The main thing that I question about the Stokes recruitment is how much he's going to command. Now, the number thrown out there for current number one recruit who actually reclassified from the 2026 cycle, A.J. Debansa, going to BYU, that number that was thrown out there apparently has been debunked multiple times. We might not know the exact dollar amount, but what we do know is that AJD is getting paid, and he's getting paid a pretty large sum of money to play basketball for the BYU Cougars. And if he didn't go to BYU, someone else was going to give him a huge NIL package. So I'm not sure exactly what the number is that Tyran Stokes is looking for, what number that teams are comfortable giving him. The only thing that I can think of as the one rebuttal, let's look at both sides. Of course, Tyran Stokes is your number one priority because he's the number one player in the country and he's from your backyard. The optics of losing that recruitment, it stings a little bit. Now, of course, he brings a ton of great things on the court, 6'7", 6'8", point forward that is ready to play in college tomorrow, needs to become more of a consistent shooter, but the sky is the limit for this kid. Even with the play on the court, the optics off the court, like the optics of landing the number one recruit, landing a player from your backyard, with that, status of being a top player, it's huge for both on and off the court at Louisville. The only rebuttal that I've brought up, and I'm not saying that I am subscribing to this side of the mentality, but I acknowledge it. If Tyran Stokes is requesting a huge, huge payday, and it is number one recruit type payday, do you have the resources to allocate to go out and get another elite player in this class? And if you do you still have ample resources to fill out the roster? Because that's one thing you don't want to do, is bring in Stokes and not have the money to fill in other spots. Because at that point, you would probably just be Oklahoma with Trae Young. Trae Young dazzled in his freshman season in Norman. And guess what? They lost, 13, 14 regular season games and got bounced first round of the NCAA tournament? Of course, my main priority, large picture here, is to go far in the NCAA tournament. And that is regardless of who Louisville brings in. And I'm hoping that the Cardinals will have the revenue. Not only that, but you would imagine Adidas. Tyran Stokes is an Adidas guy. Taylen Kenney, a guy that we're going to talk about next segment, plays on the Adidas circuit. So if there is a player that Adidas will ever help out with, or should ever help out with for the Cardinals to help out one of their flagship programs, it's Tyran Stokes. If Stokes goes to another Adidas program like Kansas, and it comes out that Adidas helped them, I'm going to sit there and be a little salty because I'm like, okay, you're going to help another Adidas program get a Louisville native? It doesn't really make too much sense. But I think it's worth noting that Joe Tipton had a recruiting update on Tyran Stokes. It seems like Louisville, Kentucky, Kansas, and Arkansas are the four teams that are recruiting Stokes the hardest at the moment. He doesn't really have a timeline on anything. I just don't think he's going to reclassify. It doesn't really, we're May 23rd. I think we'd probably have to find that out sooner rather than later. I just think he's going to stay in the 2026 class. I think that that's been confirmed multiple times. So the question now becomes this. If you land Stokes, do you go with a guard? Do you go with a forward? But maybe more importantly, what about if you don't land Stokes? Do you go with multiple guards? Do you go with a guard-forward combo? Do you go with a wing forward. Like there's so many different combinations that you could go with. And we're going to make our case that guard play should be the priority. We'll do that when we come back on this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. But first, I want to take the time to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. I feel like the main stresses that I have in my life center around trying to maintain all of my financials and understand how much money I actually have. And that gets a little bit difficult because I dine out occasionally. I do my fair share of online shopping. But when I started to go to Monarch Money, which has been my personal CFO, it has given me full visibility and control over my finances because Monarch Money hasn't been just another budgeting app for me. It's a complete financial command center. I track all my accounts. I track my investments. I track my spending. I just stopped managing my money, truthfully, and I'm starting to build wealth because I used to juggle multiple apps where now I just use Monarch to check my finances, track spending, and even plan my long-term goals. So join me. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Card Nation, thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. We're continuing on along in this Friday edition of the show where I'm explaining why Louisville must land at least 2 elite prospects in the 2026 class. And I think with the Cardinals being in a good spot for multiple of these prospects, it just reiterates how important it is to close on the deals. Because if you remember last offseason, I was impressed at how much Pat Kelsey got Louisville's name involved in certain recruitments. But outside of Michael Brown Jr., the Cardinals couldn't close, whether it was London Jamison going to Alabama, Shelton Henderson going to Duke, where I think he's now going to Miami, Nate Ament going to Tennessee. And for whatever reasons why these players chose these schools, it's not always Pat Kelsey's fault because he did land a top 10 prospect. But I do think that there was something about still being late to the game in the 2025 recruiting cycle. He now has another full year of recruiting these specific 2026 players. So I think that now you should have more of an advantage by building those relationships. So let's see, put it this way. If Tyran Stokes commits, fantastic, huge for the program. I think the other elite player that you need to bring in is a guard. I am 1,000% in the camp that believes that guard play wins in March. Walter Clayton, Florida. You can talk about Janai Broome for Auburn. They also had a guy named Tahad Pettiford who wasn't too bad himself. Houston. I mean, the list of the guys there that they had, LJ Cryer, so on and so forth. Who is that other Final Four team? Why am I drawing a blank? Alabama, Florida, Houston, and Duke. And of course, Duke had Cooper Flagg, but they also had Con Knippel, who played guard, even though he's more of a wing at the next level. You had Tyrese Proctor. But anyways, I'd say all that to suggest that I am a firm believer that guard play wins in March. And if I could construct the perfect backcourt for the Cardinals, it is going out and getting a transfer, high-level transfer at guard, and then bringing in an elite-level freshman to try to continue that one-and-done pipeline. Guard would be a non-negotiable for me. Tyran Stokes is more of a point forward at 6'7", 6'8". I just don't think that with bringing Stokes in that you need to bring in a wing or a big man. I think it's going after a guard. And we mentioned a handful of them on the last episode of the show. You've got Jordan Smith. You've got Tay Kenney. You've got Deron Rippey Jr. You've got Dylan Mingo. There's another player that Louisville was linked to that we haven't mentioned on the show. That's I think it's Ikenna Alozie is how you pronounce his name. 18th best player. All of the players that I just listed for you are in the top 20. This is a great year for the point guard class, the guard class in general. And those aren't the only guards involved. Like there's Brandon McCoy, who's the number 2 player in the country from St. John Bosco. He is, I can't believe St. John Bosco's got 3 of the top 4 players. My goodness. But it's not just them. You have Caleb Holt from Georgia, who's ranked number 7. You've got, let's see. Yeah, those are the only guys in the top 20. I think that if you can land just one of them, if I'm speaking like Louisville's going to have their choice amongst this group, please forgive me because that's not what I'm trying to lead you to believe here, because these players going for their services, it's going to be a tough road for competition. Like, I mean, you're going to go up against the blue blood level programs. You're going to go up against teams that are throwing ridiculous amounts of money at these players. Like, the goal is just to land one. And it really doesn't matter to me which one of the 5 that I just mentioned, because I think all 5 truthfully can play on or off ball. And if you don't get Tyran Stokes, let's say that Tyran Stokes, either he decides he wants to go elsewhere, or Pat Kelsey says, yes, we want him, but he's going to cost a bunch to where we wouldn't be able to bring in another elite level guy. So let's say that you're playing the devil's advocate here and there is no Tyran Stokes on the board for you. Would you go after 2 elite guards? Would you go after elite forwards, a guard and a forward? Honestly, for me, this would be my specific approach. And of course, I'm not the coaching staff. I'm not sitting here and making these decisions. I'm not saying that there's any like validity or justification as to what I'm saying. But like, if it were me and I got to choose who Louisville got, and let's say for a class of 4, my ideal class would be, assuming there's no Tyran Stokes, it would be 2 elite level guards. It would be I'm not going to say project, but maybe underrated forward like Anthony Felisi. I think it's how you pronounce his name, Felesi. He's one of the top 4 teams. Louisville's one of the top 4 teams in his recruitment, according to Jamie Shaw. Teams that are standing out right now, he's ranked just inside of the top 60. There's also 6'8" stretch forward Trey Thompson that we talked about a month ago, that 3-level scorer, can shoot the ball well, stretches the floor well. He's a little bit underrated at the moment. And then I think that your 4th one can either be an international big man, like potentially a Sananda Fru, or another big man in the high school recruiting that you feel like you can develop. Because the truth is that I think that with freshman level guards, you're more likely to succeed with versus freshman big men. Like elite level players, more likely to have instant results with the guards than you are the centers, in my opinion. Find a center that you can develop inside of the top 100 and use the transfer portal to go out and address the front court. So there's a couple of different roads that you could go down, but they all meet at the final destination. That is 2 elite level players. Like, could you imagine if the Cardinals could get 2 of the 5 that they're going after at guard? Like a Deron Rippey Jr., Jordan Smith combo would be, filthy on the court. Tay Kenney and Jordan Smith, Dylan Mingo and Tay Kenney. Like I said, I think that some of these guys might be listed at shooting guard, might be listed at point guard or combo guard. I don't care. All 5 of these guys can play on or off ball. You're playing positionals basketball in the year 2025. As long as you're a willing passer and can play with one another, you can make it work. You definitely can make it work. You're seeing it at the college level. You're seeing it at the pro level. I am a firm believer in guard play. Go out and get at least one elite level guard. But let's look at the other side of this argument. If you go out and get Tyran Stokes or even don't, let's take a look at some of the front court options that the Cardinals could look at in the 2026 class. But before we take a look at those front court options, I do want to give you a little bit of a scheduling update next week, which is the last week of May. There won't be an episode on Memorial Day. I don't believe. There might be, but I can't tell right now. We're still sort of waiting for some news to come out. There will be a total of 4 episodes coming out on the Locked On Louisville feed next week, just to give you a heads up on that. But let's continue and conclude the conversation. Louisville must land more elite level talent in the 2026 class. In my opinion, the perfect number is at least 2 elite level prospects. And let's take a look at who some of the front court options could be. Of course, we talked about Anthony Felici and Trey Thompson. I don't imagine that either of those 2 players are going to rise up to elite rankings. Thompson could if he gets more recognition, because he does have that talent. But if Louisville says, you know what, we want some difference makers in the front court, and even if you do or don't get Tyran Stokes, you can still go out and get at least one front court player. I think that the conversation starts with Christian Collins, who could, very well end up as the number 1 player. 6'8", 200-pound forward from St. John Bosco. He has been a guy that has taken the recruiting world by storm. The potential is off the charts here. The Cardinals offered back on January 14th, and they have stayed involved with Collins. And he is a guy that, this is a top 3 NBA draft potential player here that we're talking about. A guy that has incredible athleticism, can create off the dribble, getting to the rim. Probably needs to add a little bit more to his frame, but the potential is just absolutely wild for Christian Collins. And then you kind of look down the board, and the Cardinals haven't been mentioned with too many more players in the class at the moment. But Jaxon Richardson, 6'6" forward from Columbus High School, where the Boozer twins played. He has been a player that the Cardinals have gone after. Caden Samuel, 6'5", maybe more of a guard than he is a forward, that's supposed to be visiting Louisville sometime after the EYBL circuit. There's also another player from Columbus, is Caleb Gaskin, 6'8", 210 pounds. He's ranked as the 11th best player in the recruiting class. And there's just so many different options that you could look at. But in terms of true centers in this class, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of top end options. And that's another reason why I suggested that most of the elite level guys that Louisville goes after might need to be guards, because Arafin Diane is the number 1 ranked center in the class right now. And he is 22nd in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. But if you go to the composite here, it's Davion Atkins, and he's number 26. So, the value at getting elite level guys is probably going to be with guard play, because there's more options. You have more, throws at the dartboard, so to speak, to where you can land some of these top guys. And there's just not many, center options that you can truly go after. And like I said, I think that a lot of Pat Kelsey's system is going to be based upon guard play. So, of course, Duke, Kentucky, Carolina are going to be going after the vast majority of these players as well. Kansas too. So if you get Stokes, I think you're probably looking for more of a prototypical power forward. If you don't get Stokes, maybe you bring in a player on the wing, again, just bring in the talent. And whatever position you don't address or positions you don't address in the high school class with those elite level players, that point you would use the transfer portal to go after those guys. So, of course, I'm naming a good amount of players. And could this be viewed as best case scenario? Yeah, of course. Could I be looked at as too optimistic? You know, I've been called many things on this show. Illiterate is one. But optimistic, too optimistic probably isn't something I've been called too often. I think it's more so the other side, too pessimistic. And truthfully, I view it as not sunshine pumping, not being a Debbie Downer, but trying to stay in that healthy medium and trying to be as realistic as I can. But I firmly believe that with the resources that the Cardinals have, with the potential success that the Cardinals have this year, or could have this year, and the coach that they have proving that he can be successful at the Power 5 level, why can't Louisville go out and get 2 5-stars? They got one in Pat Kelsey's first cycle. Now you increase that number by 1. I just don't think it's far-fetched. Like, I'm not sitting here and suggesting that it's, completely unheard of. And it's preposterous to think that. And for those that want some nice transfer portal players, my rebuttal is, why can't you have both? Why can't you have both? Like the Louisville Cardinals, you can't sit here and go out and tell the rest of the nation that you've got a significant war chest of NIL and revenue sharing. And then when it comes time to going to battle for these players, say, we just don't have the funds. And I'm not saying that Louisville is doing that currently, but you can't do that in the future. So of course, my top priority would be bringing in Tyran Stokes. I understand that the benefits of bringing him in would be incredible. But it's not going to ruin the class if he doesn't commit to Louisville, if you can bring in still 2 elite prospects. I really don't have a priority list at the moment yet. Maybe I will here in a month or a couple months, but if you bring in one of the elite level guards and an elite wing or a front court piece, I'm happy. 2 elite guards, I'm happy. 2 elite wings or front court players, I won't be upset, but I'd like to have an elite guard as well. That means you would have to, go to the transfer portal and get a solid guard there. But there's a couple different ways that Louisville can succeed in this class. Let me know your thoughts below in the YouTube comments. That is going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. We'll be back early next week. Everyone have a great day. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, and go Cards.